Obi-Wan Kenobi is a beloved Star Wars character who features in all 6 of the original Star Wars films made by George Lucas. In 2019, it was announced Disney would be creating a new Disney Plus series starring Ewan McGregor about the character's exploits between Episode 3 and 4. For the most part, people were happy about this, as it was one of the main things that the fans wanted ever since Disney bought Star Wars, unlike 3 years later, in 2022, they finally released the series. And yeah, it's definitely something. There's a lot to talk about with the Kenobi series, but in this video I will be primarily covering the writing, as I believe this to be where the main issue lies. There are some things that are good, some bits are fine and forgivable, and some bits that are just plain bad. I'm gonna try and be as fair as possible during the analysis of each episode, as at the end of the day, Star Wars is made for children, and a space fantasy franchise being dissected to an absurd degree, for the most part, is just unnecessary. Since the originals, as well as the prequels, aren't exactly high art when it comes to storytelling. It's good because of the spectacle and the culmination of all of its parts, and I'm sure a lot of people can agree with that. However, many of the flaws in those films do not come down to the outright poor writing. There are countless moments in Obi-Wan Kenobi that expect you to suspend your disbelief to a ridiculous degree, where certain key events or concepts unfolding on the screen, even at a surface level, don't make any sense. You don't even have to delve deep to notice them. Before we begin, I'd like to assume that if you're watching this, you've seen the series and you know what I'm talking about for the most part. I won't be recapping everything, but I'd like to point out some of the good as well as the bad, just because the good also highlights the potential of some aspects of the show. Also, I'd like to say I'm not hating any of the people who worked on the show, because at the end of the day, they're only human and only had good intentions. Writing is hard, but that doesn't make it immune from critique, and many things on the show are objectively bad. With that out of the way, let's start on episode 1. We begin in the midst of Order 66. Jedi are getting slaughtered. Nothing is wrong with this scene as far as I'm concerned. Maybe the camera's a bit too shaky, but honestly, who cares? Shortly after, we're on Tatooine, where we see some Sith Inquisitors exit from their ship. The main bloke you may recognise from Star Wars Rebels, which is set after this. More on that later though. They manage to lure out a Jedi by threatening the locals. After exposing him, they somehow manage to let him escape despite outnumbering him 3-1. He just runs out of the cafe thing without any Inquisitors doing anything until he's gone. This is where we learn that one of the Inquisitors, the third sister, is interested in Obi-Wan for some reason. Cut to a scene with Obi-Wan trying to make ends meet, trying to survive. It's a good scene that sets the tone nicely for the episode. It's slow paced, not much dialogue either. He reaches his cave where he meets a Jawa who stole some of his ship and then tries to sell it back to him.
If you're going to steal my parts and then sell them back to me, could you at least clean them first, as a courtesy?
Kenobi gets a little gift for Luke. It's a nice touch, to be honest. Kenobi then has a nightmare about Anakin's turn to the dark side, feeling he is responsible for all the bad things that Anakin did. I find it quite interesting that Star Wars fans were okay with, fallen Obi-Wan Kenobi, but weren't okay with fallen Luke Skywalker, but that's an entirely different topic. Anyway, the next morning he goes and sees Luke and leaves him the gift from earlier. On the way back, he encounters the Jedi from the cafe, who then asks for his help. Obi-Wan just refuses, basically. All of this is fine, it makes sense, I have no issue with it. We cut to Alderaan, a beautiful landscape where we're introduced to Kid Leia, who plays a joke on her carers by switching clothes with her friend and then running off into the forest. She even has a pet droid thing too. We never see or hear much about Leia's childhood in the films, so it's a nice surprise, especially since it wasn't in any of the promotions. She gets found and taken back to her adopted parents. Everything here is fine or even good, to be honest. The next scene, we're taken back to Obi-Wan, where he's arguing with Owen about the gift he gave Luke. Owen doesn't like him getting involved with Luke because of his ulterior motive. He wants to train him with the Force. Overall, the scene is good and makes quite a lot of sense, to be honest. Next, the Inquisitors come into town and explain that they are looking for a Jedi, the one from earlier. The third sister asks Owen a lot of questions. She's very suspicious of him, but ultimately he fools her. She still thinks he's lying, but is told to let him go. This is important for later. Kenobi then thanks Owen and he leaves. Back on Alderaan, we see a scene with Bail Organa from the prequels and Leia. Their little conversation is nicely written and a good inclusion, to be honest. Right now you're probably thinking, this doesn't sound so bad so far, and to be honest, you'd be right. It's fine. But we've reached the point where the problems slowly start to show, and some of you probably know what's coming down the line. Leia then decides to go back into the forest, where she is confronted by 3 grown men. These 3 grown men somehow can't seem to catch her in a very comical fashion, and I don't believe it was intentional. And to include such a poor writing decision in the script is unreal. The direction is awful, and I can only assume the direction is so bad because the script had it in there, so they had to do it. And the weird thing is that she could have easily been written to have just been snatched as soon as these people found her, but no, we get this chase scene. And it can't have been for runtime reasons because the show is streamed on Disney+. Anyway, so it's just bad writing and it's been memed to death, so let's not dwell on it. The point has been made. So Leia being kidnapped is a plot device to get Obi-Wan off of Tatooine. He goes into town and sees the dead Jedi from earlier and then goes to find her at the request of Bail Organa. And the reason they took Leia is because of the connection between Bail Organa and Obi-Wan, so they figured he would ask for Obi-Wan's help. The bloke from earlier finds Leia's droid that she somehow hid the whole time. I don't know why she wasn't searched, and then he smashes it in front of her. End of episode. Overall, episode 1 is fine in my opinion. It's even good in some places. Everything bar that one chase scene is good in my opinion. Nothing to worry about, right? Part 2 maintains a similar level of writing quality as episode 1, for better and for worse. Everything is pretty okay for the most part. Obi-Wan goes to not Coruscant to look for Leia. There's a homeless clone trooper. Ewan McGregor sees his real-life daughter.
I was someone's daughter once too.
There's a fake Jedi for some reason, which doesn't make much sense, but whatever.
And magnets. Oh.
Obi-Wan rescues Leia with the Inquisitors close behind. All standard stuff. There's another Leia chase sequence that is pretty questionable, but it's not nearly as bad as the one from episode 1. The third sister does all these flips for some reason, but I'll forgive it. However, the fake Jedi from earlier decides to help out Obi-Wan and Leia escape their pursuers, specifically the third sister. He tries to bluff her, however she can tell he is lying and uses the Force mind read ability that we see Kylo Ren do in The Force Awakens.
That wasn't magnets, was it?
This begs the question, why didn't she use this on Uncle Owen in the first episode, considering she was so certain that he was lying? It's a weird decision to put this in, as they could have easily made the third sister threaten this guy to make her more intimidating, but they didn't. Anyway, after this, the third sister stabs the Grand Inquisitor, the bald guy, because reasons. The choice to make her do this makes zero sense, considering we know the bloke doesn't die since he's in Star Wars Rebels later on in the continuity, so why bother with a fake out death and why not kill one of these other no-name Inquisitors? Just to make her a bit more intimidating. Finally, Obi-Wan escapes with Leia on a shuttle, and the episode ends with a shot of Vader, with Kenobi finding out that he is still alive. Overall, some weird choices, but yeah, it's okay. Nothing screams bad so far, so let's go on to the next one. We can all agree that this is the best episode at this point in the series. Obi-Wan and Leia go to this semi-desert planet where they meet a cast of characters, some being Empire sympathizers, some being undercover rebels who put an interesting perspective on how people may have reacted when the Empire's priorities shifted since the end of the prequels. Some nice character moments between Obi-Wan and Leia, talking about Padme. I know some people laughed at this one scene with the laser gate, but honestly, who cares? There is one important scene though that we'll come back to later, and it's the third sister. She gets reprimanded by Darth Vader for letting Obi-Wan go, warning her that if she fails again that she will die.
Fail me, and you will not live to regret it.
Moving on, Obi-Wan and Leia go to a town where they meet with some rebels. Vader and his gang show up and start wrecking shit to draw out Obi-Wan, snapping necks and shit, crazy stuff. Anyway, Kenobi sends Leia away to escape while he faces Vader. They duel for a bit, and I thought this was okay for the most part. It's meant to show how out of touch Kenobi is with the Force and fighting compared to Vader, who's full of rage. I think the set piece and the budget screams fan film a bit too much for some people, but I didn't care that much, to be honest. One weird thing did happen at the end though, and it's in the scene where Vader burns Obi-Wan. It's a brutal scene, but he force pushes him out of the fire to presumably torture him later. This action puts out the fire so the stormtroopers can retrieve a burnt Obi-Wan. However, a rebel from earlier shoots the flammable objects in the center, causing the fire to erupt again, letting Obi-Wan escape. It begs the question as to why Vader didn't just put out the fire again. We could hand wave this though and just say Vader was in it for the chase, but that's up to you. In the end, the third sister finds Leia before she can escape. Overall, I believe the episode to be better than the previous two, but as you know, it goes downhill from here, so yeah. Whoever thought a filler episode in a 6-part series was a good idea needs to rethink how to run a show, especially for one that has as many eyes on it as Star Wars. Holy shit, I don't even know where to begin at how terrible this episode is. It's amazing how badly they fucked it up. Obi-Wan regroups with the rebels after getting some treatment for his burns. This bloke is apprehensive to help him, but then he instantly changes his mind without Obi-Wan saying anything.
I had a wife once. I knew exactly what she was before we got married. We tried to hide it, and the Inquisitors found her anyway. So I know exactly what the Empire can do. Look, if you want my help, you got it.
Afterwards, they break into the Inquisitor's house with the worst security in the whole of the Star Wars canon, looking at Fallen Order here, where Leia is being interrogated by the third sister. One of your major villains of the series is failing to intimidate a 10-year-old girl. Jesus Christ. I feel bad for the actress who has to play her because she got done dirty by the writers of this. Jesus fucking Christ. Anyway, once Obi-Wan infiltrates the fortress, the rebel from the previous episode helps him with the little communication thing from episode 4, speaking into it literally next to other people who are within her earshot. It's a very odd writing decision when it could have just been at a secluded terminal or something. I'm pretty sure many people thought that was weird. She then gets some suspicion from this random bloke and fights the dude without any of the people in the room still noticing somehow. At this point, they're asking quite a lot from the viewer, to be honest. Don't ask questions or you might stumble into some bad writing. But as most of you may know, this isn't even the worst of the episodes, so buckle in. Obi-Wan finds this Jedi tomb type thing where all sorts of Jedi are captured and frozen, including a youngling who still has his training helmet on. And you want to know why he still has it on him? It's because a Disney executive said, "How will people know it's a youngling if he doesn't have the hat on?" And I'm not even joking. Anyway, the rebel from earlier lures away the third sister away from Leia so Obi-Wan can use his glowy baseball bat to cave the heads in on the stormtroopers. Afterwards, we get a scene where Obi-Wan is actually using his lightsaber, and he's also using the Force to do something, which is the only bit of true development and progression that we actually see in this episode, and it lasts for about 30 seconds. All three of them regroup while Leia hides underneath Obi-Wan's coat. I'm sorry, but come on. Could they really not think of a better way to get Leia out of the base? And I don't mean Obi-Wan, I mean the writers. This is the best they could come up with. Like, was it done for a laugh? I don't know, I don't think so, because the tone of the series is quite serious throughout, and it's still serious in this episode, to be honest. Whatever. Eventually, they get caught and a firefight ensues. Luckily, a couple of snow speeders show up and cover them, even hovering in the air, which opens up a lot of other questions. You know, we've never seen this before. This is probably the part where somebody in the comments would say, in comic 204 of the Vader series, there's a hovering snowspeeder, so, yeah, it's possible. But the average viewer hasn't read and shouldn't have to read that sort of stuff to get their surface level questions answered, to be honest. On one hand, we have a youngling who's wearing his helmet so the viewer doesn't get confused, and on the other we have a well-known Star Wars vehicle doing the exact opposite of the things that they were doing in Empire Strikes Back. I don't get it. That's not even mentioning the fact that they fit 4 people into the snowspeeder somehow, a vehicle that only houses 2 people. Anyway, they manage to escape on a nearby shuttle. Again, great defenses, but I'll forgive it. And some bloke called Wade dies.
Wait!
And let's be honest, until she said his name, you didn't know who he was. And I still don't, to be honest, and even looking at the clip, I don't know who Wade is. Upon finding out about their escape, Vader bursts into the Inquisitor's lunchroom, bloody fuming at the third sister for failing to catch Kenobi and losing Leia. However, for whatever reason, he decides to give her another chance. This is the same Vader from the previous episode who was seen snapping people's necks willy-nilly. It makes Vader seem quite stupid to trust such a clearly incompetent person. Even when in the previous episode he said if she fucks up again she will die. It's just poorly written, to be honest. The episode ends with the third sister explaining that she has put a tracker on Leia's little droid. Overall, it is the worst episode so far and could literally have been skipped by having the third sister put a tracker on Leia at the end of the last episode. It asks the viewer to suspend so much disbelief to the point where even thinking about anything that happens in the episode for more than a second causes the whole thing to fall apart at the seams. What a goddamn mess. At least after the last episode we know it can only get better, right? Well, yes, that's right, to be honest, but not by much. We open with a shot of Coruscant, back before Attack of the Clones. I'm going to address the flashback sequence as a whole here since it's scattered throughout the entire episode. I think it's pretty good. The de-aging isn't perfect, but works well for the most part. The only question I have is, how did Obi-Wan win? Anakin literally disarmed him and said he was victorious. It's only when Anakin has his back to him does Obi-Wan take his lightsaber and proclaim he actually won. Like, what more was Anakin meant to do? Kill him? I know the scene is meant to show how Anakin has always been hell-bent on victory no matter the cost, but I thought it was just a little bit odd. Either way, I thought it was fine. Obi-Wan and Leia arrive at a rebel base hangar. They find out that they're being attacked by the Empire, still in pursuit. But Leia's little droid is now evil and decides to sabotage the hangar's roof. Interesting considering all the third sister said was that she put a tracker on it earlier, but hey-ho, I'll forgive it. Leia then somehow figures she can fix it. No idea how. She's never been here and she's not shown any engineering skills with anything apart from her little droid, so I'm not sure how she would be able to be capable of fixing the hangar door. Maybe if she was being directed by the engineer bloke, it would have made more sense, but it just seems like this scene was put in there to be like, whoa, she's cut from the same cloth as Luke, even though they have completely different lifestyles. I don't know, it just seemed kind of lazy. Shortly after Leia climbs into the vents, Obi-Wan checks his mobile phone and has a message from Bail Organa, who conveniently doxes him in every form of the word. So anybody who possibly could listen to the message knows exactly what he is talking about, which is especially weird because the message was him being concerned about his lack of communication with him, possibility that Obi-Wan was compromised, so he decides to send a stupidly detailed message to him? I sure hope this wasn't only done for some stupid plot device later on in the episode. Next up, we have the third sister with a bunch of stormtroopers showing up at the Rebels' front door. For some reason, Vader, who is in a nearby ship at this point, doesn't show up himself, but whatever. The stormtroopers shoot at the door for like 5 minutes while the viewer questions why the third sister just doesn't use her lightsaber. And then she uses her lightsaber. But not before speaking to Obi-Wan through the wall and learning that she was a youngling who survived Order 66 after being stabbed. The door opens and the stormtroopers just kinda stand there and get mowed down. Despite being severely outnumbered, only like one person from the Rebels dies as well as a droid, but whatever, that's just Star Wars. Kenobi eventually surrenders in order to save his rebel chums. He speaks to the third sister again, asking her to betray Vader. She refuses and calls Vader in. Before he arrives though, the writers couldn't figure out a way to make Obi-Wan escape this situation, so they decided for the third sister to send Obi-Wan inside for some reason with only 2 stormtroopers to hold him captive while Vader arrives. Fucking lazy. Vader then arrives and realizes that Obi-Wan has escaped. He sees the ship taking off and then pulls it to the ground Force Unleashed style. Pretty cool. However, that would mean that Obi-Wan doesn't escape. So the writers made it so there was a second ship which escaped, despite there being several Star Destroyers in orbit. We'll forgive Darth Vader for not doing the Force thing again, we'll say he was too tired from the last time. Still pretty lazy though. Afterwards, the third sister attacks Vader, which causes Vader to absolutely destroy her, which makes sense. She gets stabbed and falls to the floor, which paves the way for the shocking twist that the Grand Inquisitor is not actually dead. What a shocker! Vader and his gang decide to leave her on the floor and not kill her for whatever reason. But then she finds Obi-Wan's mobile phone on the floor and she can see it's been heavily damaged. She switches it on and it just happens to show Luke Skywalker's IP address, which Bail Organa just happened to say during his overly detailed holo message. What great writing. Oh, damn, that's so good. At this point, I was just kind of speechless. I mean, it's Disney Star Wars, so who fucking cares? But Jesus, this is bad. The last 2 episodes effectively killed all hype and potential intrigue the series could have offered, but we still have 1 more episode to go, so let's get into that. We've reached the finale, arguably the most anticipated episode of the series. It dropped just yesterday and it was okay. I don't know what everyone else's opinion on the episode is, but to me it was just okay. I'm not going to recap the episode this time because, let's be honest, if you're watching this you've probably already seen it, so let's get this out of the way first. The whole third sister subplot was about as uninteresting as you expected. Despite the doxing from the previous episode, the leap that she had to make about Anakin's children is quite questionable, and her whole motivation surrounding Darth Vader is also questionable at best. Maybe that was the point? Who knows? Either way, the character was kind of wasted. The main event of the episode is obviously the fight between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi. The rematch of the century, they kept calling it on all the social media pages. And that, it most certainly is not. It's quite an underwhelming fight as a whole, to be honest. I keep saying that phrase. Disney fucking love their floating rocks. The only good thing to come out of the fight is at the very end. We all knew this bit was coming though. They have to get their money's worth from the actors, right? Obi-Wan cuts a piece of Vader's mask off and reveals Hayden Christensen underneath. The brief dialogue is actually quite well written and probably the best part of the entire show. It's quite emotional and quite well acted.
I'm sorry, Anakin. For all of it.
And after that, the rest is just Disney attempting to bridge some of the gaps between this and the original trilogy. Obi-Wan calling Anakin Darth, then talking to Leia about her mother, and then he goes and sees Luke, complete with odd timing of some fan service.
Hello there.
I don't know, I just felt like this would have been better timed elsewhere, because, I don't know, it just didn't really fit the scenario. Either way, it made me laugh, so make of that what you will. Also, yeah, Qui-Gon appears at the end, but we all saw that coming. It was still nice though. Overall, the episode was alright. I preferred part 3. I don't know, I just felt like it had a lot more character moments. The Obi-Wan series is an incredibly flawed story, with good scenes littered throughout, and I think people would agree that is the best way to describe it. In my opinion, I believe the series could have been shrunk down to 4 or 5 episodes, and it would have been better as a result, or even better yet, possibly even a movie. And I know a lot of people aren't a huge fan of it, but I believe in the future I think it will be better received, because when you watch a show weekly, if an episode is bad, looking at part 4 here, you can't just go on to the next one. The bad episode sticks with you for an entire week, so people watching it from here onwards will not have that issue. The story arcs for the most part were uninteresting or just plain bad, and don't get me wrong, some parts were good or fine, but it doesn't justify the show's existence in the first place. The lack of creativity or vision Disney Star Wars has is a massive shame. Anyway, I don't really have much else to say about it. If you want some genuinely interesting stories revolving around Star Wars, take a look at these if you haven't already. Anyway, that's all. Have a good one.